I have in the past, yes, a few times. I love it. It's beautiful.
Do you get a chance to really come in contact with the people?
Well, we have here. We've met a lot of people from Vivi because we've been here a week. We shot at the fair for
The detective was supposed to make Lee Remick a superstar. Instead, it nearly destroyed her. One scene went so horribly wrong that the audience laughed when they should have been in tears. But that's just the beginning. Beneath her dazzling Hollywood smile was a life filled with heartbreak. A failed marriage she desperately tried to keep hidden. A movie role that tarnished her reputation, and a devastating truth that forced her into the shadows at the peak of her fame. Born on December 14, 1935, in Quincy, Massachusetts, Lee Remick seemed destined for success. Her father, Frank Edwin Remick, was a well-educated businessman, while her mother, Gertrude Margaret, was a passionate actress with deep ties to the performing arts. With an older brother named Bruce, she grew up in a family that was both privileged and artistic. But behind the seemingly perfect family image, trouble lurked. When she was just 7 years old, her parents' marriage crumbled. Her mother moved Lee and Bruce to New York City, leaving behind the comfort of Quincy for an uncertain future in the bustling metropolis. New York, however, became a place of transformation. Determined to give Lee the best opportunities, her mother enrolled her in Miss Hewitt's classes, an elite private school on Manhattan's Upper East Side. At the same time, Lee trained in ballet at the Swoboda School of Dance, under former Bolshoi ballet dancer Maria Swoboda. She also studied modern dance under Charles Weidman and explored acting and theatrical design. For years, ballet was her greatest passion. She dedicated herself to it, striving for perfection. But as she grew older, her ambitions began to shift. The stage itself, beyond just dance, started calling to her. By her mid-teens, she was auditioning for summer stock theater productions on Cape Cod, getting her first taste of professional acting. In 1952, at just 16 or 17, she saw an advertisement for dancers at the Music Circus in Hyannis, Massachusetts. There was only one problem. She was too young. That didn't stop her. She lied about her age and landed the job, performing in 10 different shows over 10 grueling weeks. The work was exhausting, but it was exactly what she had dreamed of. After graduating in 1953, she enrolled at Barnard College in Manhattan, determined to stay close to the theater while continuing her education. But juggling school and acting proved overwhelming. One of her professors gave her advice she couldn't ignore. She had to choose between education and acting. She made her decision quickly. After just one semester, she left Barnard to pursue acting full-time. It was a gamble, but one that paid off almost immediately. Lee Remick made her Hollywood debut in 1957's A Face in the Crowd, playing Betty Lou Fleckham, a high school majorette whose blend of innocence and allure made her unforgettable. To prepare for the role, she arrived on set 3 weeks early, training with real majorettes in Arkansas. The dedication paid off. The film, directed by Elia Kazan, was a sharp critique of media manipulation and introduced Andy Griffith in his film debut. Though it wasn't a box office smash at the time, critics later hailed it as a masterpiece. Kazan had spotted Remick on the television show Robert Montgomery Presents and knew instantly that she had something special. It was her ticket from TV to film. Filming took place in Clinton, Louisiana, and the atmosphere on set was tense. Orson Welles was already a Hollywood legend, and his presence was overwhelming. Remick later admitted she was intimidated by him, but rather than let it shake her, she channeled that nervous energy into her performance. The production wasn't smooth. Welles clashed with director Martin Ritt over creative decisions, creating constant tension. But when the film was released, it was a triumph. It revived Ritt's career after he had been blacklisted in Hollywood and proved that Remick was more than just a beautiful face. She was an actress to be reckoned with. Then came 1959 and the role that changed everything. Anatomy of a Murder, directed by Otto Preminger, was a groundbreaking courtroom drama that tackled subjects Hollywood had long avoided. Remick played Laura Manion, the wife of a soldier on trial for murdering the man who allegedly assaulted her. James Stewart starred as the defense attorney unraveling the case. Laura was unlike any role Remick had played before. She was confident, flirtatious, and unapologetically sensual. Audiences didn't know what to make of her. In the 1950s, women in Laura's position were expected to fit a certain mold: demure, broken, tragic. But Remick's portrayal shattered those expectations. Laura didn't cower. She exuded confidence, dressed in tight sweaters, and carried herself with a boldness that made audiences uncomfortable. She wasn't just a victim. She was complicated, layered, real. That made her one of the most talked-about characters of the year. The film itself was a lightning rod for controversy. It openly discussed rape, contraception, and sexual violence, topics that had been nearly forbidden in Hollywood. It wasn't just a movie. It was a statement. And yet, despite all her success, something darker loomed ahead. Hollywood had a way of building up its brightest stars, only to cast them aside when they no longer fit its mold. Lee Remick had fought hard to be taken seriously as an actress. But one misstep, one failed role, and the industry would turn its back on her. And that's exactly what happened next. The film that was supposed to solidify her place as a superstar instead nearly destroyed her career. The marriage she had kept hidden from the public was unraveling, and the reason she vanished from Hollywood at the peak of her fame? That truth is even more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Some cities even banned the film because of its explicit dialogue, but that only fueled its success. It earned 7 Academy Award nominations and is now regarded as one of the greatest courtroom dramas ever made. For Lee Remick, Anatomy of a Murder was more than just a film. It was a turning point. She had already proven she was more than just a beautiful face, but this role cemented her ability to portray characters with depth and emotional weight. She followed up with Wild River in 1960, where she played Carol Baldwin, a young widow fighting to keep her family's land as the government pushed for modernization. Set in the 1930s during President Roosevelt's New Deal, the film tackled the emotional cost of progress. Directed by Elia Kazan, it was a love story wrapped in a battle between tradition and change. Remick gave Carol a quiet strength, balancing her growing relationship with Montgomery Clift's character, Chuck Glover, against the larger social struggle. Critics praised her performance for its raw honesty, but Wild River struggled at the box office. The film's political themes overshadowed its deeply personal story. Over time, though, it found new life, and in 2002, it was added to the National Film Registry, cementing its place as a classic. The following year, Remick took on one of her most unsettling roles in Sanctuary, playing Temple Drake, a privileged Southern belle whose life spirals into darkness. Based on William Faulkner's novel, the film toned down some of the book's most disturbing elements, but maintained its gothic intensity. Temple's story was a psychological descent that forced audiences to confront uncomfortable truths. Remick portrayed Temple with a haunting blend of fragility and defiance, making her pain and internal conflict feel painfully real. The film received mixed reviews. Some critics accused it of relying too much on shock value, but many agreed that Remick's performance was the highlight. She gave the character a depth that could have easily been lost in the film's dark themes. Despite this, Hollywood still struggled to define her. She was often compared to Brigitte Bardot, marketed as a sex symbol rather than a serious actress. It frustrated her. She saw herself as an artist, not just a glamorous screen presence. Even in films like Anatomy of a Murder, where she gave a nuanced performance, studios focused more on her looks than her acting skills. She fought against these labels, seeking out roles that would challenge her and prove she was more than just a pretty face. At the time, Hollywood rarely tackled alcoholism with such unflinching honesty. Some preview audiences were shocked. They expected something lighter from Lemmon and Edwards. The film refused to soften its brutal reality. Some people even walked out of early screenings, unable to handle what they were watching. But despite that reaction, Days of Wine and Roses became a landmark film. It proved that Remick could handle complex, deeply emotional roles, and it took her career to new heights. She had already turned heads in Anatomy of a Murder and Wild River. But this was different. It was the kind of performance that lingered long after the credits rolled. She continued to take on challenging roles, but The Detective in 1968 pushed her into particularly uncomfortable territory. Starring alongside Frank Sinatra, she played Karen Leland, the troubled wife of his character, Joe Leland. The film tackled heavy themes like police corruption and homophobia, but Karen's storyline felt strangely out of place. Instead of adding depth, it turned her character into a scandal rather than a meaningful part of the story. Karen was portrayed as a woman struggling with what the film sensationally labeled nymphomania, a term often used in the 1960s to exploit rather than explore female characters' struggles with any real depth. The way the film handled her storyline drew sharp criticism. Some felt it reduced her to a subplot, meant for shock value rather than contributing to the film's broader themes. One scene in particular caused an unexpected reaction, an intimate moment between. Then, in 1976, she took an unexpected turn. The Omen was unlike anything she had ever done before. Horror wasn't her usual genre, but this was more than just a supernatural thriller. It was a psychological descent into fear and paranoia. Remick played Catherine Thorne, the adoptive mother of a child who might be the Antichrist. Opposite Gregory Peck, she delivered a performance filled with tenderness, dread, and desperation. The film became a box office phenomenon, grossing over $60 million in the U.S. alone, the equivalent of more than $330 million today. It was one of the year's biggest successes and launched a franchise that would continue for decades. Amidst her rising success, Remick's personal life was filled with both love and heartbreak. On August 3, 1957, she married television producer Bill Colleran, known for working on The Dean Martin Show and The Judy Garland Show. Their life together seemed promising. 2 years later, on January 27, 1959, they welcomed their daughter, Catherine. Their son, Matthew, was born on June 7, 1961. While many Hollywood stars became consumed by fame, Remick made her family a priority. She chose stage work in the 1960s to spend less time away from home. But balancing a demanding career and a growing family wasn't easy. Her marriage to Colleran began to suffer. By the time she earned an Academy Award nomination for Days of Wine and Roses in 1962, their relationship was already strained. The pressures of fame, work, and distance only widened the gap. By the mid-1960s, it was clear they were no longer the couple they once were. Then, she found love again. In 1969, while working on the film Hard Contract, she met British producer Kip Gowan. He had an impressive career, contributing to major films like Darling, Far from the Madding Crowd, and The Lion in Winter. Something about him felt different. They married on December 18, 1970, and this time, Remick found the stability she had been seeking. They split their time between England and Osterville, Massachusetts, a place that felt like home. It gave her peace, a break from the relentless Hollywood machine. She continued acting, but now she was more selective. Together, she and Gowan worked on several television projects, including The Women's Room, 1980, The Letter, 1982, Rearview Mirror, 1984, and Of Pure Blood, 1986. Their marriage lasted until the end of her life. Then, in 1989, her world shifted. While filming in France, she felt exhausted, more than just the typical fatigue of long shoots. At first, she dismissed it as the flu, but when the exhaustion persisted, she underwent tests. A chest X-ray and CAT scan revealed devastating news: tumors in her kidneys and lungs. The diagnosis was grim. The cancer was advanced, and the tumors in her lungs were inoperable. But she refused to give in. She turned to immunotherapy, a treatment designed to strengthen the body's natural defenses. The side effects were brutal, yet she endured 2 grueling rounds of treatment, each lasting a week. She held onto hope. In July 1989, she underwent surgery to remove one of her kidneys, hoping it would slow the disease. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. By 1990, her cancer went into remission. She even returned to acting, believing she had defied the odds. But the relief was short-lived. The cancer returned, more aggressive than before. By mid-1991, there were no more treatment options left. She made the heartbreaking decision to stop medical interventions and spend her final months in peace, surrounded by those she loved. On April 29, 1991, she made her last public appearance. Hollywood honored her with a star on the Walk of Fame. Though visibly frail, she stood with dignity, offering one final moment to the industry that had shaped her life. About 150 fans gathered to celebrate her, holding signs that read, "We love you, Lee." Close friends, including Jack Lemmon and James Stewart, paid tribute to her talent and kindness. Lemmon, who had starred alongside her in Days of Wine and Roses, called her one of the finest actresses he had ever known. Just 2 months later, on July 2, 1991, she passed away at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was only 55. She had chosen to spend her final moments in comfort, surrounded by those who loved her most. Her funeral brought together some of Hollywood's biggest names, including Elizabeth Taylor and Gregory Peck. Jack Lemmon delivered a moving eulogy, not just honoring her career, but the kindness and resilience that defined her life. Her children paid tribute by singing "Anyone Can Whistle," a song from one of her Broadway performances. Even in death, her legacy endured. She had spent her career fighting for meaningful roles, refusing to be reduced to a Hollywood stereotype. She took risks, defied expectations, and left behind performances that still resonate today. Lee Remick's story was one of triumph and tragedy, love and loss, but above all, it was a story of a woman who lived on her own terms.